yeah. It's another episode of Unapologetic on WOVU 95.9 FM. I'm your host, Eric King. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday and allowing yourself to be have as much fun as possible. Allow yourself to, chill, groove, and do all that other good stuff. So, today is a second part of our series on parenting. And this time, we're going to talk about something that is near and dear to my heart. Paraphrase a quote one of my friends where they say, F them kids. There's every now and again, there's a time when we dislike our kids. And so there's a lot of stress that comes along with being a parent. And one of those stress that we think is plausible or something that needs to be done is constantly liking our kids. Now, love is something different, right? So, in loving your child is an action, and that action allows you to present and be and all that other good stuff. But liking someone or liking your child has a lot to do with just your personality and how you interact with that child. And so today we have a very special guest, Dr. Tyffani Monford. She is a psychologist, and she's going to come in and talk a lot about this idea and this family dynamic. So here's the truth. We rarely admit that we dislike our child's behavior. So let me go backwards. Disliking a child's behavior doesn't make you a bad parent. It makes you an honest human. Every parent has been there, and we've often had those moments and felt isolated in how we feel. We keep those feelings blocked on the inside because we feel judged by family, by friends, by the culture, especially, depending on the culture that you're from. If you're any person of color, the idea of family and the kids are really paramount to what goes on in that child's life or what goes on in the life of the family. And so if you are having a hard time being a parent, if you are having a hard time being interacting with your child, it can be difficult, and it can be something that you can use to judge yourself. And the silence can turn into anxiety, can turn into depression, can turn into a lot of things. So now let's look at it from a bigger picture. Parenting isn't just a role to the age of 18. It's a series of shifting events and roles. So before you become a parent, depending on how you do it, you're always the me. And the me person is that person that at times is having that issue with your child. And so every 6 to 18 months, your relationship with your child changes. Your child went from being carried to a toddler to a preteen to a preschooler, a middle schooler, and all the way up to, teenage years, to where this person is developing their own personality. They're developing their own ways. And a lot of times our discipline or how we choose to discipline is sometimes based on how we feel about that child and how much that child is clashing with us. I have 3 children, and none of the 3 kids are the same. They're pretty much all different. And in being different, they have different temperaments. And so that birth temperament, if anyone has ever studied human development, that slow to warm baby, easy baby, all of that, that carries up into their personality. Now, having a child does not come with directions. I don't care who you are or what you study or what religion you are. None of this comes with directions, and not having those directions, it can be, very difficult. And so let's just talk about family dynamics. In family dynamics, there are times when mom feel as though they're not enough because their child is having an adverse reaction to their discipline or an adverse reaction to something that they put in place. And so a lot of times the mom internalizes that and judges themselves based off of their ability to be a parent, rather than understanding that that child that you have, you know, has their own personality, has their own personhood. You're simply the steward of this child. And then fathers feel marginalized because they're depending on their household or how they were brought up. They're not, particularly sure on how they, fit into this role of parenting. And so there's a lot of harm, that can go on, and a lot of harm that can happen. And just simply, taking a step back, without simply taking a step back and understanding that your role as a parent is simply to be a steward over this child's life, and you direct them, unfortunately, based off of your inner workings and how you were parented. If you as a parent never took the time to, to get some parenting skills, or learn some parenting, what's the word I'm looking for, classes, or let's say you didn't have anyone in your life that was a good parent, or you have a negative interaction with your own parent. All of this shows up in your parenting skills, and it shows up in how you show up for your kids. And there are times when you are a person of deficit, or you are a person that does not, for the most part, was not parented in a way that was most helpful or healthy. And so what happens is, when you go to parent, you believe that you're going to give your kids all of the things that you wanted and desired, without recognizing that that child is someone totally different from who you are, and who you are and what the world is at that given moment. So, like I said, this is our part two of this. Last week, during Wellness Wednesday, Sade and I spoke a lot about, what do you do once your kids go back to school, and allowing you to reclaim that 2.5 hours of, time that you got back, to yourself. Now, if you have a, for lack of a better term, a toxic relationship with yourself, that 2.5 hours you don't see as a benefit. You see it just as something to do. And you're probably using that 2.5 hours to recharge for later on, instead of taking that time and taking that time for you. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we as parents, and how we relate to our kids, and how allowing ourselves to be honest about how we feel about our kids really sets the tone for what we're doing and who we are in our day-to-day life. So we do have the one and only Dr. Mumford here, and she's going to be my sounding board as we going through this process of learning, how to deal with the fact of, although we love our child, at times we dislike our child. So, um, like we do, the sun is still shining, we still functioning. What I want you to do is just take a step back. I want you to chill a little bit. We're going to bring in, once I figure it out, we're going to bring in our midday mix. And in that midday mix, oh, hold on. I guess somebody who was here before me didn't switch it. Let's see. Mini jack one. There we go. Let's see. There we go. All right. This is high tech, high profile radio. I'm here trying to get everything together, but we right on time. What we're gonna do is just take our midday hump day mix break. What I want you to do is jump up out of your seat, dance a little bit, shake a little bit, get it going on. And on the other side, we're gonna bring in the one and only Dr. Mumford, and she's going to help us feel better about liking our children. All right. So get up out of your seats and let's dance. Welcome back. Unapologetic on WOVU 95.9 FM. I would like to bring in, let's make sure all of our electronics are working. We're going to bring in Dr. Dr. Tyffani Monford, PhD. Let me say it properly. She is a psychologist, a author, a public speaker, and just all around cool person, because she sent me clients and she liked to send me clients. So I appreciate that. So let's go ahead and just be a little selfish. So Dr. Tiff, let's hear you. Are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Look at that. Technology is working. All
Mhm.
right. So welcome. How are you doing this day? Did you get a chance to enjoy the midday mix?
I did. I was glad I was backstage because I could dance.
I appreciate and want all dancers. So just
Mhm.
make sure you're doing that. All right. So we're gonna start it off. So today we're talking about how much possibly we dislike our kids. Which understanding, I'm not sure. Are you a parent?
I am.
How many do
I
you
have 2 kids,
Okay.
2
All right.
kids.
So we good. So I got 3, you got 2, we got 5 in between us.
Mhm,
And so every now and again, I get clients that come to me,
mhm,
whether they are moms or dads, and they feel really guilty about their interactions with their with their child. And I usually say there's 2 times when people come to therapy. And let me know if this worked for you. One is when they get connected to someone that they really truly want to be with, and they
mhm.
find out something is a little off about it. So that's one. That's when they come into therapy and they're real about it, not that
Mhm,
other stuff that we see on social media.
mhm.
The next is where they get that little person that acts just like them, and then they're centered enough in their personhood to come on and be like, you know what, maybe I need to address some of these childhood. And so a lot of times what I do is I direct them to a book called Adult Child to Immature Parents. So a lot of times I direct them to books, but I want you to give me when one, is this something, because I can talk about personally, is this something that you're aware of? And is this something that, you come in contact with the work that you do?
Yeah, I think there's a difference between liking and loving your kids. I think a lot of times parents love their children, but they don't like what they do, right? There's whether there's characteristics again, like I say, God got jokes, right? Those pieces of yourself, and you see them manifested in your child, and you like, this is what my parents dealt with. Or there's just you feel that you had like this belief about what you were going to be as a parent and how that was totally going to manifest in your child, not realizing that you're not the only influence on your child's life, right?
Correct.
And so that disappointment and them not meeting the expectations that you had, and you begin to kind of question who I am if I don't. There's sometimes I don't like this little person, however little they may be, whether it's 5 or 15, right? And you begin to question, what does that mean to not like something a lot of times that you chose to have, right? That you chose to by birth,
Mhm.
adoption, or however they came into your life, that you chose to take on the responsibility of parenting. And what does that mean about who you are?
Yeah. And that's the part. You don't in your in creating a child, you don't need a license to do that. You also don't need a license to have a child. And so in this world, we produce, or we are constantly practicing in the production of children, and then we
Mhm.
get one. And then that one, whether by the choice of us, of who we want to be, or by our choice, or by sometimes a settle, which is real, we get this child, and not only do we have to take care of this child, we also have to figure out how to interact with this child for at least 18 years in a way that is a healthy way. So why is it so hard for parents to admit that they don't like their child sometimes? Why do you think?
I think because there is this unrealistic expectation when you choose to parent, again, however parenting comes to you, that liking and loving are the same thing. And so it's if I say I don't like you in this moment, and usually it's not I don't like you, I don't like the behaviors that you're displaying in this moment, right? The
Mhm.
decisions that you're making, is that we, for one, we kind of make this global I don't like. And so we say, I don't like this person who I created or who I chose, right, to parent. And what does that say about me? I can't say that to people. So we don't separate that with the idea of liking and loving,
Mhm.
and then we also make this overall, I don't like them as a person, which also says something about us versus, let me break this down. It's not them overall, it's the behavior, it's
Yeah.
the decision making. And so if we kind of separate those out, it makes it a little bit easier to own it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's look at the behavior, because a lot
mhm,
of times, so kids come in as a 100% at times blank slate, and
mhm,
many of the behaviors that our children have are a direct representation of who we are. When you're talking to your parents about disliking, so I'm gonna tell you how it works for me.
mhm.
When I'm talking to when we're talking to parents and they're talking about how much they're disliking their child, I have to really ask them, how much of it you're disliking your child, or them dislike, or you disliking a younger version of you? How much is that? Because the behavior is what, a lot of times they talk about. What about you?
Yeah, I think we, for one, we need to kind of look at what are the expectations, right? Is this the piece of me, then I was like, where it's like God has jokes and I feel bad for my parents, right? It's that, are these the pieces of me that as I grew older and matured and kind of learned how to utilize them became positives,
Mhm.
but in a child who isn't able to go through that yet, I don't really like. So is it the stubbornness, right? Sometimes it's the unwillingness to listen, the belief that I'm always right. And it's like, are some of these the same things that you display, and that it's kind of hard to see and deal with them in this younger version of yourself. And so it's like, how do you come to terms with it? Some of this is you,
Yeah.
some of this is also outside of you, and maybe things that they've been exposed to outside of you, that in kind of choosing to parent, a lot of times we say, this is who my kid is going to be, right? Because I'm going to eat well, I'm going to do everything I need to do, I'm going to gentle parent, which I believe in, but I'm going to
Mhm.
gentle parent, I'm going to do all these things. And because of this, they're going to turn out exactly like this. And
Yeah.
when they don't, because of, again, just sometimes part of it is just kind of their personality.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's our personality. And other times it's what else they're exposed to in the world that you are now having to deal with. And I think that's hard for us to look at, because our children are not going to be exactly,
Yeah.
they come in as a blank slate. But let's be honest, many of us, the blank slate, we've written on it, and we have their 18 years set of what we expect them to do and how they're going to be, and that's not how it turns out.
So before we jump into the roles, mother, father, how it
Mhm,
works out, let's talk about the cultural aspect. So
mhm,
in many cultures, the children are the the way to prosperity. Let's go with that.
mhm. Okay.
In some black and brown cultures, children are the way to prosperity, right?
Mhm,
So if you are of an immigrant family, you're coming here, the acculturation of the children you really don't pay attention to, but you want to make sure that you get them in a direction where they need to go in order to support the family. And then
mhm,
you get them in that way, and you don't like where they go. When you
mhm,
look at when you look at it from a cultural standpoint, how often, one, do you come in contact with individuals from a cultural standpoint in related to their children, as well as how do you handle the cultural aspect of this child from the moment they came out of you was their own person. You're
mhm,
just here to steward them. How do you handle
mhm.
that?
And I think that saying that I am my ancestors' wildest dream, right? That is what a lot of times culturally we're doing, is that we're creating this next generation to be better than the generation before. And part of that is that route to prosperity, right? You're going to do better than I did. And so we set this stage of what that's supposed to look like. I wrote this book chapter about acculturation and kind of how family in this book around like doing family work. And one
Hmm.
of the things is that you, especially if you're kind of having children and you're bringing them into a new culture, there is sometimes this expectation that I'm putting them in this place only for access to resources and opportunities, right?
Right.
That's all they're supposed to take from that. But
Right.
they're supposed to culturally maintain exactly what our values and our community does.
Yeah.
That's not how that works. And so so we don't, that's what we hope, but that's not what
Right.
happens. And so sometimes it's very difficult, because it's, no, I wanted you to access the resources, the knowledge, the opportunities, but
Hmm.
your how you what your cultural, what your values and your beliefs are supposed to be the ones that I value. And so that at times causes some conflict,
Hmm.
because whether it's issues of wanting to be more independent, wanting to have
Right.
autonomy, wanting to be able to be more assertive in communication versus acquiescing to what parents want to say. You always honor your elders, and it's like, well, I'm now, some of my, as I've, this acculturation process has been, my voice matters, right? And
Yeah.
so sometimes the difficulty is getting parents to understand it's not, you don't get to choose, right? That there are the pros and cons of this access. And so how do you realistically understand that that's what it's going to be, and instead of just automatically assuming that your child should have the same values and beliefs, how part of it is you convincing them that those values and beliefs are good ones, right?
Right.
Because they'll say, well, these are just what our community believes, this is what my family, my cultural believes, they should just believe them. It's that, just do it versus
Just
let
do
me
it.
explain to you why
Yeah.
there's value in it. And so I think sometimes that's hard for communities when we're looking at issues of acculturation, because I shouldn't have to explain why this is important. I shouldn't have to model why you should hold on to this value and belief, but you do.
Yeah. The other part is, so that's immigrants, right? So now we're
Hmm.
looking at Black and brown
Hmm.
individuals who are here and has been here for generations.
Yep.
There's a different idea of what my kids are supposed to do. Not only are my kids supposed to do what I want them to do, they also supposed to leave at 18. And when they leave at the age of 18,
Mhm.
they, better damn well come back and respect me. What's your thoughts on that?
Again, I think it's a setup, right? You can't have it both ways. Also have beliefs about the idea of, we all know brain development not until you're 25. There's still this nurturing and still the support, and that culturally kind of having gotten away from that
Yeah.
is also something that our communities have to grapple with. What does it mean to put someone out at 18, right?
Mhm.
So the difficulty in talking to families is you want on one hand, you're saying, I need you to be an adult. I need you to have all the adult responsibilities. I need you to make all the adult
Right.
decisions. Yet when you walk in my door, you are now expected to be my child again.
Yes.
And that's not a possibility. It's an aspirational goal of yours, but
Yeah.
it's not really realistic. And that's a difficult conversation to have about what does it mean to now parent an adult?
Yeah. So
And that's
let's
different.
yeah, and that's in parenting an adult is a
Mhm,
totally
mhm,
different experience because
mhm,
one, you get to see how well you did,
mhm,
quote unquote, how well you did, or how poor you did, so to speak. When we talking about the guilt, I believe a lot of times, if we're looking at the role of mother and father, guilt is associated with one, the gender of the child and the identification of the gendered parent. So a lot of times when I hear guilt, there are some moms that when I used to they just feel guilty, period, because they're comparing themselves to their moms. So that was one.
mhm, mhm,
In comparing themselves to their moms because their child isn't like how they were, they feel guilty. So let's just kick that one first, right? Before we jump into any further, this idea that I was parented this way and I'm parenting my child this way. And as a mother, because my mother was such from that person whose mother was such a profound nature, they want to do everything like their mother is doing. And now their child, they're doing everything like their mother is doing, but their child isn't given the response that they want. What do you say, or what would help them? Let's go with that. What do you say to that parent?
a couple things. One, your child is not you.
Right.
And so, how you responded is going to be based upon who you are, and your child is someone different. I think the other thing is that we also need to look at generational changes. And
Mhm.
so you're sitting here and you're comparing, it's not just about your parents' parenting, it's about how the world was dealing with children at that point in time and viewed parenting, right? And so when people say stuff like, in my neighborhood, if my mom told me to do something, I did it. But that was also reinforced at that time by the entire
Mhm.
community, right? Everyone's saying that's what your mama said, you do it. They're all holding you accountable to the same standard. And so generationally, that has changed. And then again, what your kids are exposed to in the world has changed from what you were exposed to. They're exposed to a world, and on some levels, people will say it's better that they are told, express yourself, make your wants and needs known, set boundaries, to make sure that you're healthy. And some of those things can be great. I think it's difficult to deal with when that also impacts how they respond to your parenting.
The idea that we as parents here, let me because I'm getting a little feedback. We as parents have the blueprint for parenting a child that had no directions
Mhm.
is something that is really difficult. I see it more difficult with moms than I do with dads. Can you talk about that idea that I thought I had the blueprint for this, and so this blueprint isn't working. So what do I do? What's up with this self, because it turns into this value of self rather than this value of skills.
A couple things is acceptance. I think the first thing, you didn't have the blueprint, right? You may have had a blueprint to a totally different building, and so it's not going to match the building that you got. And so part of it is that even that acknowledgement that this isn't working, right?
Mhm.
And instead of sometimes when something isn't working, because we're saying this was what the blueprint was supposed to be, we dig down even further and just become more stubborn in trying to do the exact same thing, which is going to cause us frustration.
Double down.
And so instead is that recognition, this isn't working. Let me look at my own child and what are my goals for my child in terms of my parent child relationship.
Mhm.
What works to kind of get me towards that goal with my child, recognizing how my mother parented me may not is not working with the way I need to parent my child. So I recognize it's not working. Let me look at the thing. What are my actual goals? What are the values, beliefs, behaviors that are very, very important for me to make sure that I reinforce in my child, or make sure that I don't reinforce in my child? And
Yeah.
so what ways may I need to shift my parenting to meet the needs of the child that I have in front of me? And that may be per child,
Yeah.
right? Child
Yeah.
number one, I always say God gave me the first child he should have at that moment, because that second one, test my gangster, right? um, but so even that, it may be even that first child, you're like, but this worked with child A, and that blueprint I had was great. It worked with them. It's not working with child B, because child B is a different being. And so part of it is that recognition, and then that willingness to be flexible and shift and
Mm-hmm.
see what's working based upon what you're hoping for that child. So it's not my parenting style needs to be this, it's what are the things I want for this child,
Hmm.
and how may my parenting styles need to adjust to make sure that that happens for that child.
So go back to this idea of expectations. In every relationship, there are
Mhm.
expectations, and those expectations dictate how you move far
Yes.
from those expectations.
Mhm.
What I do see, and I'll get to the fathers in a moment. What I do see is it's okay to have standards for your child, right? So those standards, meaning as in you are defining what the floor is,
Mhm.
and you have to ensure that that floor or those standards are idiosyncratic, or in other words, individually for each child.
Mhm.
But the expectations, should the expectations be different for each child? And how do you explain? How should a parent explain it, not only to themselves, but also if they're co-parenting, on
Mhm.
how the expectations should be different based off of this child and that child?
A couple things is the recognition that our children, that again, we have the floor, right? Like you said, there are some basic things that we want to instill in our children. How we instill them may need to look differently, but there's some basic expectations we have for our kids, right? Other than that, we have to look at the ages of our children, right?
Right.
They are different ages. My 8-year-old, I'm not going to have the same expectations for my 14-year-old, right? We're not going to do that.
Right.
We also may have different expectations based upon their cognitive abilities, based upon their personalities, based upon just their overall abilities, right? And so part of it is sitting and saying, let's talk about our kids, right?
Mm.
And how our kids are different. This child may be an introvert, this child may be an extrovert. So that child that is an introvert, I'm not going to expect them to get up on stages and give all these speeches, right? Because that's
That
anxiety
Easter
for them.
speech.
Right. Right. I'm not going to expect them to do that, right? That first one, yeah, because this is their thing. They also have different interests. And so part of it is that let's look at our children and see who we got. And
Yeah.
that's part of it. You know, how you sitting here like, what, how many books you got when you play cards? Let's look at these kids we got. Let's sit down and really look at who we have in front of us and recognize they are different. They
Yep.
have some similarities, but they operate their ages, their abilities, their interest, what brings them joy, which oftentimes is that what we can use for reinforcement. We need to kind of sit down and realistically, and I think sometimes the difficulty I see it with people is when you have that one child that excels,
Yep.
and that one, then you have that child who struggles,
Yeah.
and then you're trying and you're not liking that child who struggles
Yeah.
because you're comparing them to that child who excels, and you're setting those same goals, and you're becoming frustrated because they're not meeting them, instead of saying, let's look at this child as an individual. What are realistic expectations that we have for them, understanding that the floor stays the same, but then when we're kind of going up to the next levels, those
Mhm.
may look very different per child. But I think you have to be honest and ask yourself, how are they different and the same?
Let's go with the ghost of fathers. And so, what I mean
Mm-hmm.
by that is, in looking at most Black and Brown families, depending on where you're from,
Mm-hmm.
and I keep referencing Black and Brown, but this goes for everyone. But depending on where you are, who you are, what you had, your social economic status, what the socialization of the community was,
Mm-hmm.
you may have had a ghost of a father. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that your father is not around. That even in the household, that father may feel a bit disconnected. And a lot of times with men, we're born with these emotions that we're told are not actually what we're supposed to have. And so when they get into these family situations, one, they lack the ability to emote in a healthy way, and they feel as though I should not be relegated simply to punishment.
Mm.
What do you say to that?
I agree. And I think that's what happens. Wait, I mean, we've seen the old TV shows and in the movies and stuff, and they're like, wait till your daddy gets home,
Yeah.
right? And that's the punishment person, right? I think that, especially when we're talking about like cis hetero relationships, right?
Mhm.
Specifically, when we're talking about those, that they're, especially we talk about like when it comes to like black fathers, they say they're some of the most involved when you let them, right? Like they are really involved with their children. But when we're looking at the communities, we also have to be willing to kind of change this societal expectation of what fatherhood looks like and allow for that, even if we're starting within our own households, right? Because it's oftentimes society reinforces, I'm going to communicate with the mom, you know, I'm going to communicate with the mom. Doctor's appointments are about the mom. If there's something happening, you go to your mother. Like we reinforce that.
Mhm.
Um, and so we within those households have to be very intentional in allowing the space for the fathers to be involved in the moments of joy and be the first line of defense in those. That we also have to encourage and support them when they're wanting to be a part of the difficult emotions.
Yeah.
When we're doing parenting, we have to also say this is a co-parenting situation when there's two
Mhm.
parents, whether they're in the household or not. How are we navigating this with our children? Let's have these conversations where we talk about our children. Your input is valuable and is included versus that, yeah, we can talk about it, but I'm going to do what I'm going to do because
Yeah.
I'm mom, right? That we have to, and some of it is we have to look within ourselves when we're in those cis hetero relationships as the woman within that relationship and saying, I can't have it both ways. I can't say I want this person to be
Yeah.
involved in
Yeah.
co-parenting with me, but only in
When
these
I
two
want to.
areas.
When I want
I
to.
have to redefine co-parenting, right? I have to say this is really us doing this together and
Yes.
make the room for it and encourage them to also express themselves and model their
Mhm.
concerns as well. And how are we going to do this together?
Okay. So let's round it out.
Mhm,
And what I mean by that is let's get it to a point to
mhm,
where we start building some or giving out some skill buildings. All right.
mhm,
So you've already talked about co-parenting, and I
mhm,
want to come back to that, and I want to be a little bit more specific about
mhm.
how to co-parent. But I do want to go back to this idea of strategies. My child is at when I am at the top of my frustration level, when I'm really not liking my child, what do I need to do, or what do you suggest I do to remind myself that this is just simply a moment, and I love this person, but this person is really bothering me? What are some strategies we can give?
I think first is that we need to redefine the, not saying I don't like my child, but what don't I like, right?
Yes.
So, because I think that brings the emotion down too, is what don't I like about my child at this moment, right?
Mhm.
And so we want to say, was it a decision they made? What is it? Is it a behavior they're displaying? What is it, right? So let's bring
Mhm.
it down to that. How do I now need to respond to that decision or that behavior? So we
Right.
bring it down to action steps. So that's the first thing we need to do.
Okay.
We need to also remind ourselves that there are times when we are not going to like our child, and that's
Mhm.
separated out from loving.
Right.
Because again, we kind of throw it all together. Um, I think that that's the first thing. I think if we respond to our child in that height of that emotion, this is the real difficult one for parents. The hard one. This is the one. When we respond to our child at that height in a way that we know was not helpful,
Yeah.
we have to be able to go back and have, in an age appropriate way, that apology to our child for that response, right?
Say
Which
that
is hard.
but wait, say
Ooh,
that again, because we have to go back and understand that we need to apologize for that to that child, not only to teach them, not only to reinforce the teachings of apology, but
right?
also make amends with that child, which we
Yes.
have a problem with in day-to-day society. All right.
Oh, yes. And so, and part of it is that we're that modeling of that. Sometimes I get it wrong, right?
Yeah.
That, and it may be, yes, I'm upset with what you did, but the way that I expressed that was a problem.
Was
And our
not
kids will be shocked. My kids get shocked when I come back, like, you know what? They're
my
like,
fault.
Right,
My
right,
fault.
but we're modeling that emotional intelligence. We're
Yeah.
modeling that interpersonal relationship with our kids. So we also have to own that piece of it. And I think that's a hard part, is because we won't come back and kind of look at how we responded and where did this response come from. And for some of us, the intensity of our response is our own issue, right?
Amen.
It
Yeah.
wasn't even what that kid did. I'm seeing myself. I'm seeing my own frustrations. I'm
Yeah.
seeing these hopes and dreams that I had, these unrealistic expectations, and I have to kind of own some of that. So we
Mhm.
also have to be able to self-reflect on,
Mhm.
why was my response to that so high?
Okay.
And then see, is this something with the kid, or is this something with me that I have to process?
All right, before we close out, we got to get to the co-parenting. So
Okay.
give some more top give two things that or three things that co-parenting can do to assist, that or co-parents can do whether in the house or out of the house in order to manage the relationship or the dynamic with the child.
I think one of the things is it very clearly reinforces that we have common expectations for our child.
Okay.
That what your mom is saying is the same that I'm saying. So this is just that floor expectation. I think we also have to make sure that we are allowing both parents to model all aspects of parenting. So there's
Mhm.
not the enforcer and the nurturer, that we
Mhm.
both have to be those things. And so we have to make sure that we're sharing that responsibility. I think our kids also need to know that we have open communication,
Yep.
and that we are treating you as an individual. We're not expecting you to be your brother, your sister, or your cousin or me, that we are looking at you as an individual. And when we're constantly communicating with you,
Yes.
that we're letting that be known, that we are dealing with you as we're seeing you as the person.
Yes. So last month we did relationships.
Mhm.
And we only talked a little bit about kids, but what did come up, there's a level of personal responsibility we have in being co-parented to understand that there are things about us that are not quite right,
Mhm.
and those things can be triggered both by our significant others that we chose as well as the child that we chose to birth.
Mhm.
And so taking personal responsibility is really big with me.
Mhm.
Now, we got to close out and get to the next thing. But what I wanted to do is tell everybody tell them what's your latest book or what book you would like, as
Okay.
well as how they can get in contact with you.
Okay. Well, the latest thing that I did, actually, I did with my kids. So me and my daughters, we we co-authored a curriculum for Black girl serving organizations
Hey,
called Bold Black and Becoming, a healing curriculum for Black girls. They actually named the book themselves, as well. And so that was my latest project. Doing, which is also an interesting way to parent when you're having to listen to them and change the way and have them criticize the work that you do and say, no, this is not a good part. So I just recently did that with them. The easiest way to find me in terms of like overall in social is just like at Dr. Tiffany. Like that is me on all social media platforms. As relates to, the day work that I do, I primarily am within
mhm.
the inpatient psych hospital at Metro Health. So usually the only time people see me other than that, unless I'm doing consultation or assessments through the court, is when they come
Have an
into
issue.
the and we are, and when you do, like, again, we also want people to recognize there are moments in time when all the strategies we've tried are just not working, and then when you're in crisis, we come in and we work with you to be able to kind of manage those crises, to then be able to go back out and live the life that you deserve and want. So
And
I
do
do
that
see people
thing.
in hospital, and do
Well,
all the things.
all the things. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and
Of
I
course.
appreciate you, referring people. Like, we've
Thank you
never
for
actually
seeing
seen
people.
face. This is the very first time that we've actually seen each other.
Yes.
So I appreciate you actually coming on and being a
Mhm.
part of the show and
Of course.
all of the clients that you refer to our practice. So I really appreciate
And we
everything that you
appreciate
do.
you.
No problem. So as you maybe can see, we got our next, but Dr. Tiff can see it, but the people can't see it. He's acting the fool. He's our
Okay.
community message, and Dr. Bates is going to jump on and give us our community message. But Dr. Tiff, I appreciate you, and I appreciate you coming on, and keep sending them. If there's anything that you need from me, let me know, and
Oh, I
I'll make
will.
sure we do it. All right.
Will.
All right, that was Dr. Tiff. You can find her at Dr. Tiff on LinkedIn. Find her on Dr. Tiff on everything else. Go grab her book that she did with her daughters. I would just like to say thank you, and we're going to take a quick break. And on the other side of that break, we're going to bring in Dr. Bates, and Dr. Bates is going to provide us with his community message. We'll see if it's about kids all the way from North Carolina. This is Unapologetic on WOVU 95.9 FM. Welcome back, WOVU 95.9 FM. We are always doing some amazing things. And just to add, let me bring in my brother who is also amazing. If anyone is watching on YouTube or Facebook, you see him dancing. He got on his colors, he got all that. It is the one, the only Dr. Tanny Bates. Let me make sure everything is going. Let me hear you talk.
What's up, brother? What's up,
Hold
big
on,
brother?
hold on. All right, there we go. Say it.
Hey, what's going on, Eric? How are you, man?
I'm good, man. How you doing? I'm getting that. I got, when you're in the studio all by yourself. Actually, you did this in college. So
I
when
sure
you're in the
did.
studio all by yourself, you got to be the engineer, the host, and everything else. What's going on? Did you hear the conversation?
I did hear the conversation. I think Dr. Tiff did a great job in talking about our children and our youth. They're so important to us. We are now in what I call a new renaissance and a new era of Jim Crow. I like to say, and as far as that's concerned, and so we need to have these conversations around our education and really important into our youth.
Yeah. So we have, or this month, last month we talked about, and you weren't there.
No.
You were busy, you were doing your thing. Last month we talked about this idea. You ready?
Hmm.
That in relationships, one, everything that we see on social media is not our fight, and two, side chicks keeps winning. And so we talked about this idea of the family or side chicks that keep winning, is breaking up the family and breaking up everything that we got going on in our communities. Now, with that said, with that said, now we're talking about parenting and we're talking about how much at times that it's not that we don't love our child, we just simply dislike them, and we don't dislike them, we actually dislike the behavior that they're showing us. So as a community advocate, if I can pronounce it correctly, as someone that is always doing great in the community, what do you have to offer on that subject?
Sure, Eric. One of the biggest things that we have to realize, it is our youth that changes America. It is our youth that changes our history, as far as they're concerned. It was the old saying, old men argue and young men go to off and fight wars and die. Well, if you
Hmm.
look at history as a whole, Martin Luther King was 26 years old when he started the civil rights movement. All those gentlemen, Hosea Williams, our good frat brother, of course, John Lewis, they were all youth. They were all under the age of 25 years old going out into the communities because they wanted change. So
Hmm.
when we talk about wanting change, and then, as a parent myself, we actually are a reflection of what our kids do.
Hmm.
Heard recently, Louisville police chief state very verbally and out there saying that he wished he could arrest parents. They were dealing with a shooting where a young student was killed,
Yeah.
and he was saying the reactions of our youth in these streets, as the YNs, as everybody wants to call them nowadays, is actually a reflection of us as a community and a
Hmm.
reflection of the parenting and a reflection of our elders also stepping up to make sure we can guide these young folks moving
Yeah.
forward, right? They don't know better, but we have to show them better in that regard moving forward overall. So there's a couple things. Let me give you a couple different points. Number one, we have to still reinvest in our education of our students, not just what they teach them K through 12, but we as parents, we as community members need to make sure that we're educating our students, our youth on their communities and history. Because
Okay.
if you pay attention right now from a national perspective, they're gonna have me looking like I got blue eyes and blonde hair because they're trying to get rid of what we have done as a people, and this country would not be what it is without black and brown folks. Number
Gotcha.
two, we have to also start looking at paying attention to our youth. And when I say pay attention, they have grown up in what we call a digital literacy society. So what does that mean? They're getting so many things thrown at them, whether it's Snapchat, whether it's Instagram, you name it, Facebook, all these different medias, Twitter or X as they call it nowadays. They're growing up in this digital literacy things, and they're dealing with so much with that. That's why we see suicide rates go up. That's why we see body shaming, all these different things, or I could call this false narrative where people are showing there's great life, yet behind the scenes, like you said, they're suffering and got side chicks. So it's
Hmm.
important for us to understand that we really, really have to take some of them off that screen, off these good phones that we have, because now it's just a computer in our hands and
Yeah.
tracks everything we do, and truly sit down and understand who individuals was. I teach a class on leadership, and
Hmm.
I started laughing, and I made a whole hip hop talk about NWA, and my students looked at me like, "Who are you even talking about?" And I had to start to think to myself from a generational standpoint. They're listening to Little Lotto. They're listening to Glorilla, all these other individuals that ain't doing but mumble rapping. But at the same time, it's their generation, it's their time. But how do we set them up long term to become the future councilman, become the future lawyer, to become that community advisor and community advocate? These jobs don't pay as a community advocate. Trust me. Andrew Young said it the best. There ain't no 401k in community advocation. But my 401k is in the youth and making sure my community is better than I found it when I took it over as far as that's concerned.
All right.
Last but not least, we
Mhm.
have to really consider this is meeting our youth where they're at, particularly our African American males, and
Mhm.
having the conversation around multiple talks. One, career. Two, relationships.
Mhm.
And three, what is the education they get? And I'm not talking about the education just in books, but the hard knocks life education for they can navigate a successful life. Because when
Yes.
I look at this generation right now, especially Generation Z, they're floating through life, living this fantasy world, but at the same time, they have no emotional intelligence. They don't know how to have interpersonal skills. And
Mhm.
that's our job to make sure we can sit down and talk to them and engage them without them throwing hands, having issues, concerns, and using their mind. The greatest thing that we have on this earth
Is our
right
mind.
now is this computer on the top of our heads called a brain.
Amen.
And it can do as much as anything else, just like AI, which was created from us. So it's important to
Yeah.
understand that when we talk about our youth overall. But as she was saying, and as you were saying, yeah, we don't like our kids sometimes. My daughter gets on my nerves. Trust me, she gets on my nerves, but at the same time, I know I am responsible in that house to make sure she becomes a productive citizen, not a pushover, but a productive
Yeah.
citizen who produces, cares about family, cares about the community she grows up in, and gives back in that situation.
I want to give a big shout out to Sade. She said Blue Fi. So
You
apparently,
know,
right, right. She's sitting there watching you with the Sigma, all that fun, good stuff. All right, T. Any last items? Because you weren't here last week or last month
last
when we
month,
were
no.
talking about why side chicks keep winning.
Side
And,
chicks keep winning because they live in the fantasy that the wife ain't doing. That's
right.
what I always say. Whatever your wife. Here's the thing, man. We're married. You know how it is. You
Yes, this is
know,
true.
we become creatures of habit after 7, 10, 15 years of marriage, and there's no spice. We need to spice it up. So when a young lady comes along, they're 10 years younger and they tell you, oh, you looking good, old man, you kind of feel yourself. You're like, I still got it. You know what I'm saying? Overall that. But you have to ask this question is
It's
it worth it?
validating.
Is it worth it long term? That's what you got to think about overall. Relationships are never easy.
Yeah.
There's constantly has to be worked on, retooled, reskilled, refalling back in love, all the other great stuff moving forward. I think what has happened is we've let a culture, particularly women, and I'm not going to throw all women underneath the bus because y'all going to come for me, but women have accepted saying, I will be with a man who is married or I will be with someone because he can go home and I don't have to deal with him, but I get what I want out of him as far as that's concerned. Or they can say, hey, I really don't want a man because they're still young, but when they get 40 or over, they do and realize they've wasted their years.
That that didn't come up, but I can see where that came from as it relates to our dynamics within relationships. But this this month we talking about kids and we
Let's
talking
focus
about
on the kids. Let's not focus on side chicks. You know what I'm saying? They already told us, BBD already told us, don't never trust a big button smile. So
right, right. Let everybody know where they can reach you, Dr. Bates.
sure, you can follow me on social media, Tyranny Bates at Facebook, T Bates 1914 on every other platform out there. That's T Bates 1914 overall. Look forward to coming back next month, dropping some more nuggets from a community standpoint overall. But Eric has always been love, always been great to be with you here on the show.
Appreciate you.
Uh, Best show in all of Cleveland. I think one of the best shows in the nation. So we got to get more people listening, all the other great stuff overall. But it's truly what you're sharing with the people is truly a roadmap to success, whether it's personal, professional, or dealing with your own emotions and emotional intelligence.
I appreciate that, man. I really do. And that is Dr. T Bates. He is one of my longest, greatest friends. Man, I love you and ain't nothing you can do about it.
Love you too, brother. Love you too.
All right, man. That
All
is
right.
my brother, Dr. Bates. You can, connect with him in all social medias. He is out there doing his thing and loving life. So we got to come to close. They're going to kick us out. We got a couple minutes. But next week, we're going to talk about fathers in the court system. So we got my regular brother Ivor going to be in here. And then from Ivor, We got Brian Simmons. Brian Simmons is coming in, and we're talking about just how we go from fatherhood to paycheck, and how the court system looks at men as it relates to this parenting. And so much of what we talked about today had to be with one, normalizing this idea of difficult emotions with your child, and understanding that your child is not supposed to be a carbon copy of you. And there's a difference between liking your child and loving your child. Love your child, that's perfectly fine. But there are times when you definitely need time. And I can't remember what Sade used to say. She used to say something. She said something last week, and I can't remember. But remember, it's perfectly okay to, you know, disconnect from your kids for a while. Understand that your role does not does not dictate, who you are. And let's see, how can I also say this? When you whether you have a co-parent in the household or out of the house, remember it took two people to make this child, and yes, the other person may not have been perfect, but that person was chosen by you at one point to make a child, and so you chose to make the child with that person. Figure out a way to deal with that person in a healthy way, and if you can't, allow that to be okay with you in your heart, and not pass that along to your kids. So we're gonna get up out of here. Let's see. Allow me to get rest. So okay. So we talk. Sade said, "Allow me to get rest so that I can be so that I can love you properly." So that's what she said. She sent that to me. All right. So you can get this episode on Friday on Unapologetic with Eric King, and I'll catch you next week. Next week we're talking about fatherhood to paycheck, and we got Ivor, we got Brian coming in, and I appreciate everybody for listening. This is Unapologetic on WOVU 95.9 FM. Peace.